Good morning, Marysville. My name is Celine Ferreira, here with my co-host Emma Hansen, and today we are interviewing Enrique Gonzalez. He works for the Public Defender Association. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you. I'm pleased to be here.
Awesome. How was the drive up here?
It was pretty good. It was not a lot of traffic at this hour of the day, so it was easy.
Okay, nice. So what do you do at your job?
So my job is kind of interesting. I work for an organization called the Public Defender Association, and we are, we used to be the public defenders, like the attorneys that you would get assigned if you couldn't afford an attorney in King County. But now who we are is essentially those attorneys, they now work for the county directly, and my organization focuses on policy issues. So for example, one of the big issues we're working on is police reform. And there have been a lot of discussions in the public about how police officers have been either using excessive force or doing, be it police shootings, things like that. Our job is to actually help provide some guidance around how the police can better reform their practices. And part of the reason why I work for this organization is I'm also a commissioner on the Seattle Community Police Commission, and that's actually, if you're those of you who aren't aware, the city of Seattle actually got investigated by the federal Department of Justice, and they started to find that Seattle was using too much force when they were doing policing. Okay. And so what they ended up doing was they created a commission to oversee the reforms in Seattle, and so I'm a part of the commission. And then my job, my actual job, we provide a lot of support around those reform processes.
Okay. How long have you been doing that?
So I've actually only been working there since February, but I've been a commissioner since 2014. Prior to coming on the Public Defender Association, I worked for an organization for 10 years called El Centro de la Raza, and that's a Latino community-based organization that focuses on doing work with the community around social justice and civil rights issues, as well as different direct social services like emergency housing, youth case management, child care, child development services, things like that. So I worked there for 10 years, and prior to that I was a student at the University of Washington. So that's kind of how I started.
Okay. And what interested you into taking on those jobs?
So that's a great question because it actually started with my grandmother. My grandmother and my father were actually members of the original group who started El Centro de la Raza in 1972.
Oh, wow. And
they were, the way that organization started is actually, the building that the organization is housed in today originally was an elementary school. But in the late 60s and early 70s, they abandoned the school building, and students from an English as a second language program, which my grandmother was a student in, occupied the building peacefully in a protest, and the city of Seattle came in to try and arrest them, and they stayed put. And it lasted 3 months, so they stayed in this building for 3 months, until eventually the city council in Seattle allowed them to use the building on a temporary basis. And the reason why they wanted the building was because they wanted a place where people of color particularly could come and utilize services. That temporary period turned into almost 44 years. And now the organization has about 40 different programs that it utilizes for the community members. And we do a lot of social justice work, and so that's actually how I got into getting involved in police accountability issues because of my work there.
Okay, and did you have to go through any special programs in the university to do that, or was it just kind of like something you could volunteer in?
Yeah, so it's interesting because what I studied at the University of Washington was, I have a degree in American Ethnic Studies, with a focus in Chicano history. And so it's not so much that there was a degree that kind of led me to this work, but the degree I do have is around kind of the history of people of color in the United States. And a lot of that has to do with the work I do, which is what relationships do people of color have with police in law enforcement in the United States. And so my study at the University of Washington did help, but really a lot of what I've learned has been through volunteering, has been through the work that I've done outside of the university. And so I think, like, for me, the biggest thing has been that while my education set me up to work in those places, a lot of what I've been able to do has been because of my personal involvement in a lot of these issues.
Right. You said there was 40 different programs. What are some of the most, I would say, popular ones that are there?
Yeah, so there's, folks that come into that organization, to El Centro, they come in and they really look for immediate needs. For example, like there's a food bank, hot meal programs for people who are homeless. There's an emergency housing program for people who are homeless. But also, some of the more dynamic programs are also, there's a senior program, senior wellness, so trying to ensure that seniors live a long time by staying active and healthy. And then there's also a youth program where young people get a chance to really learn how to write poetry. They learn about the relationship between the United States and their own communities and how that history has been, whether they're Native, whether they're Latino, whatever their background might be, learning about their history. And so it's kind of a holistic approach. And again, that's kind of, when you look at police issues and when you look at a lot of the issues that I work on now, a lot of it has to do with my relationship with those issues as a young person, because I actually went through those programs as well before I went to the University of Washington. And so a lot of those programs are designed to develop leadership in young people to be able to take on some of these issues when they become adults.
Let's see. How old do you have to be involved in that?
In police issues and stuff? Or
Anything,
any of what I've done? Well, I really started when I was a young person, like around 13, 14 years old. Police accountability issues, anybody can become involved in those. And I would really invite anybody who's interested in looking at the Seattle Community Police Commission website and how they could get involved. But really, we need more young people speaking up and talking about how police deal with them. People who want to help reform the police should speak up about it and should talk about it. And so probably the best way to get involved and to help out is really to talk with other people who are doing the work and lend their own experiences about how they've felt and how they've been treated by police officers.
Okay. We're going to take a quick commercial break with a segment called Goofy Officer.
No. Give me. This is today's itinerary. Come here. This is our itinerary. Wait. It says here we gotta clean up the streets, make sure nobody's on them at all.
Got it.
Let a real police officer handle this one.
What? No, please, can I go, please?
Don't make a scene. Hey, you guys are supposed to be in school. What are you doing here?
Rest.
Are you serious? You just ruined this whole thing. I had this under control.
I don't even go here.
But sorry to bother you. Where'd they go? What's going on? You can't do this.
Hi, welcome back. Once again, I'm Celine Ferreiro, and this is my co-host, Emery Hansen, and we are here with Enrique Gonzalez. So earlier you were talking about your organization that you are working with and stuff. Is the only location of that in Seattle, or is there any like around?
Yeah, so the Public Defender Association originally was housed out of King County, or it worked particularly in King County. And now, since we're a nonprofit organization, we're still located in Seattle, and we serve mostly Seattle and King County. But the reality is that a lot of the issues that we focus on are statewide issues. And so we're only in Seattle, but we work with other partners around the state to really kind of affect a lot of the different issues that we work on. So my particular area is police accountability, juvenile justice, and homeless advocacy. But we work on an array of different issues, and a lot of those issues get talked about in Olympia, the state capitol. They get talked about in Eastern Washington in a different way than they do over here, because Eastern Washington is very different than King County and Snohomish County, and so we're kind of all over the place.
Mm-hmm. So sounds like you have been around the state a lot. Does your work require you to travel other places?
Interesting you should ask. I actually just found out I will be traveling to New York, to New Orleans, and to Los Angeles. A lot of what we do, in trying to reform how police do their job, we have to really look at like what are other cities in the country doing, and how are they doing it different than what they've done before. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that we're trying to do is to learn from our partners around the country and around the state around what is the best practice and how can we most effectively serve and reform the kind of policing that people receive when they make contact with law enforcement. So a group of us will actually be going to those different cities to learn about how they do that, and to bring that back to Seattle, basically to Washington, and figure out how do we do that different.
Okay. About how many of you are gonna travel down to the other places?
It's a group of us. I think it's about 12 to 15 of us. It includes city council members, community members, people who are on the Seattle Community Police Commission. And essentially, those folks are all trying to learn from their own perspective. So for example, my work, or my specific reason for going, would be to look at it from a community perspective. A city council member might be looking at it from a political perspective, like how can you influence policy politically, and for me, it's how can I influence policy when I work with people who are on the street, that kind of thing.
How often does this job require you to travel?
A couple times a year.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of work to do locally. Most of our work takes place in the Puget Sound area, but from time to time we have to travel.
And what would you say the major differences are that you see when you go? And what are like key points that you're looking for?
So particularly this next trip, what we're going for is to investigate what types of models have been used to investigate police. Mm-hmm. So the reason why we're going this time is to really learn when a police officer is involved in excessive use of force, or just use of force, how do you handle that situation? And so what we're trying to do is to learn how do you remain fair to police officers, but how do you also protect the civil rights of the people who they're serving, right? And so a lot of times what has happened is that in Washington State, particularly when somebody gets shot, police are not investigated the same way that a person is when the regular person does a shooting. Mm-hmm. And what we're trying to understand is how can we make that more equitable when it comes to treating officers with the same level of responsibility that an average citizen would have if they were charged with a crime, And so this trip in particular is to try and figure out how do different cities do it differently. And Washington State is very different from New York or Louisiana or California. We tend to be a little bit more progressive. Mm-hmm. We tend to be a little bit more kind of forward thinking per se, but at the same time, there's still a lot of problems. There's still people in Washington State that get shot by police officers. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to figure out how to end that, and really how to change that.
Okay. So what are some things that you have done in order to, because you go to different places and you listen and you look at other people's models, and but like how do you actually apply that here? What are some things you guys have tried?
Great question. So, for example, one of the things we recently took a trip out to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Albuquerque, New Mexico is very similar in the sense that they were investigated by the Justice Department as well. And one of the things that we took from there is their model around how they engage community members is very different than how we do it here. And so what they were, one of the suggestions that we went and exchanged information. They were trying to learn from us, we were trying to learn from them. And one of the things that we learned was that in order to really kind of develop the political clout that you need to change policies, you need to be able to really engage community members that can go and testify or that can go and influence an election of a city council member that may not necessarily be doing things as proactively as you want, right? And so that's an example of how, you know, that might not be something that we get unless we meet face to face. And you know, you can have all the phone calls you want, but when you go and you actually see how communities are affecting and changing their policies, it's a lot easier to bring that information back home and say, we're going to try this approach now. And how do we coordinate that with city council, with the members of the community, and so on. And so it's very different when you actually go in person than when you just kind of have phone calls and things like that.
Mm-hmm. What would some advice be for the people watching if they ever encounter any like violence or like injustice with the police?
One of the biggest things that has helped in recent years has been people recording what happens. Mm-hmm. You know, the most immediate thing is that if you believe that something is going on that is not just, a lot of times, you know, it's our word against anybody else. And so if people can actually document these things, it becomes a lot more difficult for law enforcement to deny that certain things are happening. And so one of the best things we can do is to document it and to record it. But beyond that, if you have an incident that has happened to you or you've seen something happen, the best thing is to contact either our office or any of the social justice or community-based organizations that are in your area. You know, churches are good. You know, people that you think, you know, your elected officials should know about this kind of thing. That's city council members or your state reps. But really to try and kind of share the information or share the experience so that we know what our different law enforcement agencies around the state are doing. And so to kind of keep quiet about it doesn't really do anything. Nothing changes unless somebody says something. And so we really recommend that people talk to us and let us know what their experiences have been, and then we can see how we can possibly help.
Okay. We're going to take another little commercial break with a segment called Triggered.
I feel like this is not going to be a good day. Are you freaking kidding me? Again?
I don't know. I might not be able to go through with that.
That is like the cutest shirt ever.
Are you saying all my other shirts look ugly?
What? No. I like all your shirts. This one's really cute too.
What the heck?
Watch out next time, maybe it won't bump into you.
Oh. Okay. Sorry.
Hey, welcome back, Marysville. We are here with Enrique. My name is Celine. This is Emery. And we just got back from a little segment.
One question that we were wondering during the break is, have you ever actually witnessed any of these shootings going on or anything like that?
So I personally have never witnessed any actual shootings. I've witnessed police excessive use of force myself, though. I've been in protests. I've actually witnessed protests or gone as what they call an official observer, and have seen, particularly the Seattle Police Department, using something that they call blast balls, which is they literally throw this explosive device and it basically scatters a crowd. There's talk about how these devices are, there's claims that they're safe, but we've seen people actually have injuries because they've been using these things. And so I've seen them used, and they're pretty scary. And how do you balance a person's constitutional right to protest and to demonstrate, while at the same time being protected and being safe by your police department? And so that's another issue that we're witnessing ourselves. But in terms of actual shootings, I've never witnessed that. That's actually very rare. But around the country, as we've seen, people have witnessed it and they've recorded it. And those are the types of situations that we're also trying to work on.
Okay. During the break, you were telling me about another organization you work for called Not This Time.
Right.
What is that?
Sure. So Not This Time has a very interesting name. Is an organization that was started this year after the shooting death of an individual named Shay Taylor. Shay Taylor was shot and killed by the Seattle Police Department on February 21st, 2016. And his family, particularly his brother, was living in Los Angeles, and literally the next day he came and he moved to Seattle, and he dedicated his time to really looking at why is it that why are these shootings happening, and how can we change that? How can we end it? And in the time since that shooting happened, one of the things that we found out was that police officers, if they're involved in a shooting, they're not charged with the same type of crime that any other person is. So, for example, the officers that have done shootings in Seattle and really in Washington State, they can't be charged with murder if they kill somebody, because you have to be able to prove a legal thing, which is called malice, which is literally, you have to be able to say that the officer either didn't like the person or wanted to kill them. And usually what officers say is, well, I was afraid for my life.
Oh.
And that gets them off the hook, right? So in order to change that, we've created an initiative called Initiative 873. And that initiative is actually takes that piece malice out of the law and allows a person to, or a prosecutor, to charge a police officer with murder, to be able to bring the question, should we charge this person or should this person be convicted? We can't do that in Washington State right now. And so the organization Not This Time has been trying to get 200,000 signatures or 250,000 signatures to put it on the ballot so that people can vote and decide whether or not this is something that they should do.
Is that something done online, or are you going around the city and asking people and informing them about it?
Yeah, how can people get involved?
Yeah, so there's a website called Yes on 873, and essentially it's a statewide initiative, and so there's people all over the state in Eastern Washington, Western Washington, going around and getting signatures from registered voters to be able to put this initiative forward. And so there's more information on that website, Yes on 873. Actually, Yes on I-873, and people can get involved and help out and learn about what the issue is.
Okay. Let's see. Sorry, lost my train of thought. For the organization of Not This Time, how long how many signatures do you have so far?
So right now I believe we're somewhere in the vicinity of approaching 200,000. I'm not quite sure. I have to get a count, but we're pretty close. And even if we don't, we actually have until December 30th to finish that off. Not quite sure if we're going to get there, but even if we don't, there are many of those signatures can get carried over to the next year, and so it can become something that we do next November. when the actual the regular general election every year happens, that can be something that people could vote on. Reason why we wanted to have it this year before December 30th is because if we manage to get those signatures in time, the initiative actually goes to Olympia, and the state legislature can vote on it, and immediately it'll become law this legislative session, which ends, I believe, in March or April. If they don't vote on it, then in November, the general public in the state of Washington could vote on it.
Okay.
So if we don't get those signatures by December 30th, we don't go to the legislature, we just go right to November. So there's still many ways to get involved, and there's still a lot of ways that people are going to hear about it.
How many people are involved in the creation of that organization?
So the core group of people, it's, there's actually a lot of people that have done different things around the organization. It's probably, I would say right now, there's a core group of people that are about, 15 people that are really kind of organizing. The Taylor family, Shay Taylor's family, are very key in doing a lot of that organizing. But really, they have meetings every week, and there's anywhere from 50 to 100 people that meet to talk about police accountability issues, how police are treating people in the community every week. And so, how many people are involved in the organization is hard to say, because it varies from week to week when it comes to the meetings. But even if people don't go to meetings, there's people all over the state doing this work, and so it's really kind of become a statewide organization.
We're going to go to another commercial break. This segment is called Detention.
Quiet. So how's your day been?
It's been pretty bad.
Same. There's just been a lot of teacher drama going around the school. Okay, bye.
Welcome back. So it seems like we have run out of time. It has been a pleasure having you here. Is there any last words you'd like to tell the public about anything that you've told us about today?
Just that we invite people to get involved as much as possible. If they want to learn more, take a look at our website. It's the Public Defender Association. It's defender.org. Feel free to ask us any questions if anybody has concerns or anything.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
This has been the end. Thank you for watching, and once again, Enrique Gonzalez, Celine Ferreira, and Emery Hansen.
Thank you.